So we're going to start with the webinar. It is Raptors in the Montreal region. I want to thank Learn Quebec for running this series. So our categories of Raptors are as follows: Vultures, Ospreys, Eagles, Hawks, Falcons, and Owls. So birds of prey are also known as raptors, and that term comes from a Latin word, rapere, which means to seize or take by force. And basically, that's what raptors do. They are birds that have very good eyesight for finding food, strong feet or talons for holding the food, and a strong curved beak for eating what they catch. And those talons are most important because that's how they capture and kill the prey that they hunt for. So they're very efficient birds. And they're very aggressive in some cases, but they do what they do to survive. They don't randomly kill just for the sake of killing anything. They kill what they need to survive. So that's what raptors are all about. So we are fortunate in our region to have 28 different species of raptors or birds of prey that we can find, not all at once, obviously, but from time to time, different times of the year, in and around the Montreal region and throughout the province of Quebec. So we looked at the different categories. We're going to go through each of these categories separately. So we start things off with the vultures. The vulture is really two groups of vultures: the New World vultures, which include Californian and Andean condors, and the Old World vultures, which is the ones which include the birds that are seen scavenging on carcasses of dead animals. You've seen pictures of that probably in Africa and what have you. Well, the same thing happens here. Animal roadkill, deer, cattle in a field. Much of those animals are consumed by these scavengers. The New World vultures found in North America and South America, the Old World ones found in Europe, Africa, and Asia. So we're obviously going to look at the two species of vultures that we have here. First one is the turkey vulture. And what's unique about these birds, very large. You see the red head with no feathers. The vultures don't have feathers on the head. Feathers on the body, of course. They're quite large. They fly. You can see the large picture down in the bottom left. Very large wingspan. I think it's something like 4 feet. So these are very, very large birds. Standing, they're quite large as well. We often see them in groups. So these are very common throughout Quebec. They are not here in the winter. They've just come back actually in the last month or so. So we'll be seeing a lot of these over the next few months going into the fall, and then they'll leave us for the winter. The second vulture that we have is just starting to come into the Quebec region. We find them a little bit south of Quebec right now, but they're gradually moving a little bit north, mainly due to climate change, and that is the black vulture. And we've just started seeing some of these showing up. We had some last year down in the Phillipsburg region, down near the Vermont border. They're a little bit different. You see that they don't have the feathers on the head, but they have the black face, and they're more of a black bird, you know, overall. And again, a very large bird. Again, they do gather in groups as well, and they're also scavengers. So this is the lesser seen bird in Quebec right now, but they are starting to come in. And the previous one, the turkey vultures, which we see even in downtown Montreal. In the middle of summer, if you look up in the skies over downtown Montreal, quite often you see turkey vultures gliding around up near Mount Royal, all around our area. So those are our two vulture species. Next, we move on to the osprey. The osprey is called an osprey in North America. In other parts of the world, they use different names for it. It's a sea hawk, a fish eagle, a river hawk, a fish hawk, and it's predominantly a fish-eating bird. It's quite large, 60 centimeters or 24 inches in length, and 71 inches or 180 centimeters across its wingspan. And as I said, it's predominantly, it's found everywhere on the planet, all the continents except Antarctica. And this is what it looks like. And these are very common in our area. If you go down along LaSalle Boulevard in Ville LaSalle, there's a couple parks along the waterfront there, and we do see osprey flying around there quite often. They're large bird, predominantly black and white, and you see this one up in the top corner here. He actually is holding on to a fish that he's caught. So very impressive looking birds, and we do see them very often throughout Quebec. So we only have the one, there is only one osprey, and that is the species that we have here. Eagles. Eagles are, people are always impressed with eagles, and people are always surprised when I tell them that we actually have eagles here. Large, powerfully built birds of prey, a big, large head, and a big, heavy, very effective beak. Mostly larger than other raptors. Maybe the vultures or condors might be a little bigger. They are ranked at the top of the food chain as far as predators in the avian world, the bird world. There are over 60 species of eagles throughout the world. Here in Quebec, we only have 2. And that is the same for the United States as well and the rest of Canada. So here are the 2 that we have. The bald eagle, pretty impressive bird. This was a bird that was almost extinct a number of decades back, mainly because of pesticide, the pesticide called DDT, which caused a softening in the shell of the eggs of birds. And the eagles were almost wiped out because of this. There was a rehabilitation program, and they've come back extremely strong, and we have many of them here in Quebec. This picture I wanted to mention up in the top left here with the 2 side by side. This was taken by a lady who lives in the Eastern Township. She's in a really good birding spot, and she sees bald eagles quite regularly. The 2 flying pictures were actually pictures that my wife took out at Beauharnois. They were flying over the near the Beauharnois Dam, and she managed to get those 2 great shots. The bald eagle with the white head is the mature bird, the fully mature bald eagle. The black ones that you see here and here are juveniles. The younger birds don't get that white head and the white tail until several years into their lifespan. So you may see them looking much different, but it is the same species here. The beak hasn't turned yellow yet, tail hasn't gone white, and the head hasn't gone white yet. So we do see these, when we do bird watching field trips with Bird Protection Quebec, very often we see bald eagles. The other eagle is a little more rare. We do see it from time to time, especially at this time of the year, because there are some migrating through our area, and it's the golden eagle. You see he's more of a brownish color bird. Overall, doesn't have too much variation in his coloring. He's got a little bit of white speckling that you can see in flight there. About the same size as the bald eagle, not seen as often. They are seen a little bit further north in Quebec and Western Quebec. They do see them a little more frequently than we do here, but we have seen some passing over us, particularly at this time of the year during migration. So those are our 2 eagle species that we can find. Now this is a big category, the hawks. They range from small to medium-sized birds of prey. They're widely distributed, and there are 2 subfamilies. The accipiters, which include a number of birds we're going to look at individually, and they are mainly woodland birds, long tails, high visual acuity, hunting by sudden dashes from a concealed perch. The other family of hawks is the buteos, and these are called buzzards in other parts of the world, but we call them hawks here. And broad wings, sturdy built birds, relatively larger winged, shorter tailed, and we find them soaring mostly in big open areas. So we'll look at the ones, we have 4 of each that we can find here in Quebec. The first is the northern harrier, and this is sometimes called a marsh hawk by some people because we find them around marshes quite often. It's medium size. It breeds on moorland, bogs, prairies, farmland, coastal prairies, marshes, grasslands, swamps, and other open areas. It's not a huge bird, but it is a pretty impressive looking bird. The males and females look quite different. And there are also this, you see these ones, all the brown versions. There is this gray that you'll see with the bird as well. We don't see the gray ones all that often. We see more of these birds here. Distinguishing mark when they're in flight is this white patch at the base of the tail, where the tail joins the body. And that's a distinguishing mark when you see these birds flying. We see these birds around marshes quite often, and a pretty impressive looking bird as well. Now, some of the smaller hawks, the sharp-shinned hawk is quite small. Males are 23 to 30 centimeters with a wingspan of 42 to 58 centimeters. The bird is, let's see, females are distinctly larger, averaging some 30% longer, and with a weight advantage of more than 50% being common. So the females in this species is quite a bit larger than the male. You see some really nice markings and colorings here on these birds. They can be seen even in some urban areas occasionally, but often when you get out into the open lands a little more, you'll start to see these birds. They can be very easily confused, though, with another species, which is, I think, is the next one coming up. So this is the sharp-shinned hawk, and the one that we confuse it with a lot is the Cooper's hawk. Now, the Cooper's hawk is one that you can see right in town sometimes. I live in Greenfield Park on the South Shore, and we have a resident Cooper's hawk that comes through our yard fairly often. He comes through our yard because we have a lot of bird feeders, and bird feeders draw small birds, and these birds happen to like to catch and eat small birds. So occasionally he will come swooping past into our yard to see if he can find anything to eat. We've seen him catch a mourning dove in our backyard. We've also seen him a couple times catch pigeons. So if he can catch a pigeon and carry it off, you can sort of get an idea of the size and the strength of a bird like this. The size and the ranges are here, 220 to 440 grams, 35 to 46 centimeters in their wingspan. So very impressive looking birds. Some of the markings, you see those bars on the tail, a little white tip across the end of the tail, and all this streaking on the breast, which is really quite nice. So this one is one that you might see fairly common. This, I mentioned the one in our backyard that had caught pigeons. This was him a couple winters back after he had finished his meal. He had caught a pigeon in our yard, and that was what was left behind once he was finished. I have the unpleasant job of having to go clean up the mess after if he doesn't carry it away with him. This one he decided to eat in the backyard as opposed to taking it off and going somewhere else with it. So you can see they're pretty impressive looking birds. The next one is a fairly vicious hunter. This is a bird that can fly through forests and maneuver very quickly, very high speed, and maneuver through trees very easily. Sort of a bluish gray coloring, barred gray or white underneath, and it's called a northern goshawk. Speed on these birds is really quite impressive. They ambush their prey, as they say in the notes. The female is substantially larger than the male. You'll see that's common in a lot of these raptors, the female being larger than the males. So very impressive, kind of a mean looking face. You can see that sort of orangey color eye, really nice barring across the chest though, and the dark gray, sort of a bluish gray coloring on the back of the bird. We don't see these birds a lot, but they are out there. We do run into them from time to time. The red-shouldered hawk, two of these pictures, the first two on the left and the middle, were actually taken by one by me, or maybe both by me, up on Mount Royal, in the Mount Royal Cemetery. There was a nest that had been used by the red-shouldered hawks for several years just up behind the north entrance to the cemetery. The red-shouldered is a medium-sized bird, and males 38 to 58 centimeters long and weigh over an average of 550 grams. Females, again, slightly larger and a little bit heavier. The wingspan from 90 to 127 centimeters. And these are kind of chunky birds. You can see the size of them sitting there. You can see why they're called red-shouldered. There is this reddish patch just behind the head where the wing joins the body. And these are fairly common. I know there's one that hangs out in not too far from me in Longueuil. They've been seeing him there for a number of years, actually, in the same area. And we do see these on our field trips quite often. The broad-winged hawk is a chunky sort of bird, short and broad wings, thus his name, the broad-winged hawk. Pointed, the wings very pointed at one end, at the ends. They have sort of a tapered shape to them. Dark brown, white belly and chest with some horizontal barring. The tail can be a dark gray, black with white lines along the middle. You can see the two patches with the white line in the middle. And these are seen throughout North America, all the way down into Mexico and southern Brazil. Really powerful bird, and we do see them soaring around southwestern Quebec. We see quite a lot of them. Probably one of the most common of the big hawks that we see is the red-tailed hawk. If you're driving along a highway, quite often you see these birds sitting on lampposts or on trees along the side of the roads. We have a number of highways that we call Hawk Alley. Highway 30 on the South Shore, we often see a lot of red-tailed hawks along the road. One of the most widely distributed hawks in the Americas. It breeds from central Alaska and the Yukon, Northwest Territories, east to southern Quebec and the Maritimes, all the way south to Florida, the West Indies, and South America, and stretches throughout. This bar across the belly, we actually call it a belly band, is quite obvious on the birds, and the red tail on the mature adults. There are also a dark phase of these birds that has more black on them as well. So they don't all look exactly the same, but this red tail, is particularly in flight or sitting perched, is quite obvious on the mature birds. And these are found quite widely throughout Quebec. The rough-legged hawk is the next one. Fairly large, 46 to 60 centimeters, wingspan from 120 to 153 centimeters. That's up to 5 feet across the wingspan. So this is a very large bird. You can see the coloring on them. What's noticeable in flight to help you identify are these wrist patches, we call them. These two black spots underneath the wings that you can really see quite obviously when the bird is flying overhead. And that's really a good identifying mark, which the other raptors don't have. So it's very unique on the rough-legged hawk. So that's our hawks. Now we move into falcons. Now these are the smaller raptors, and these are some birds that, 1 and 2 in particular, that have adapted to us quite easily. And we do see them around us on a fairly regular basis. There are 37 species of raptors spread throughout the world on all of the continents. Very fast birds, not as fast as the peregrines. The peregrine is the fastest one of them all. It can travel 320 kilometers per hour, making it the fastest moving creature on Earth. So a pretty impressive bird. We're going to look at 4 species of falcons that are found in Quebec. The American kestrel, a really nice, colorful bird. You see the blues and the rusty colors and the white face markings. Really nice tail on these birds. It can hover in the air with rapid wing beats. It can sit up there and just hover over a prey that it's hunting. It's quite small, 12 to 27 centimeters in length, 50 to 61 centimeters in wingspan. So that's only about 2 feet across when they're in flight. So it's quite small. Not as common as they used to be. There's some projects to try to rehabilitate, repopulate these birds into the wild going on right now. Some of projects that our Bird Protection Quebec organization has actually funded some projects to help repopulate this species. This is the most common one, and this is the bird that we find even in our residential areas. We've been seeing reports of them from NDG, from Laval, from the West Island. We have some here on the South Shore. They're quite small. They're only 24 to 33 centimeters, which is a maximum of 13 inches long, 20 to 29 inch or 50 to 73 centimeter wingspan. Quite small, very fast though. And we hear them. They've got a great call. I don't have the call available here, but you hear this sound in your neighborhood possibly, and you might see this small bird, smaller than a pigeon. They're very fast moving. You kind of have to keep your eyes open for them. You see one down here that's eating one of his favorite foods. They like dragonflies. So they sometimes hang out around bodies of water, marshes, and things like that where they can catch insects on the fly. So they're not so much looking for other birds like some of the other birds we looked at, but things like insects are good food for these little merlins. So you may see some of these right around your neighborhood. They're nesting at this period of the year, and you may hear them in your area. You can go online and check the sound of these birds because chances are you might hear them before you see them. And the peregrine falcon. This is the impressive speed bird that we talked about. We have a few of them nesting around the Montreal area. This is another bird that was in danger of becoming extinct, and they're starting to make a nice comeback. It is a bird-eating raptor. There have been there's a nesting pair on the Université de Montréal building in Montreal up on the mountain. There are some on the Champlain Bridge nesting. There's been some on the Jacques Cartier Bridge in the past and a number of other areas around us. It's about the size of a crow, very streamlined. You can see how muscular they look, really impressive looking birds. And the speed is the impressive thing. What they do down to catch things like pigeons is they come in behind, they usually catch the bird in flight, and they'll come in from above and behind the bird and just come down and strike in midair. Very effective and very quick. The speed is just remarkable, 322 kilometers or 200 miles per hour when they dive. Just really, really impressive birds. And the one that we don't see very often, and I wish we could see more often, they tend to hang out a little further north than us, is called the gyrfalcon. It's the largest of the falcons. You can see this white and black presence on them. Very, very impressive looking bird. They can be all white, and they can actually go all the way down to a very dark version of the gyrfalcon as well. And occasionally we find them around us, reasonably close to Montreal. When they do come into our region, it's a bit of an exciting period for bird watchers as everybody tries to get out to see them because we don't see them as often as the other falcons. So now we move on to owls. And there are over 200 species of owls throughout the world. And owls mostly hunt at night, and they hunt everything from small mammals to insects to other birds. And there are a few specialized species that actually hunt fish as well. They're found on all regions of the earth except in the polar regions and some remote islands. And they're divided into two different families. And we have, believe it or not, 11 species of owls that we're going to look at that can be found throughout Quebec. This little guy is kind of cute. We find these nesting in Montreal in some heavily wooded areas. The Westmount Summit has had some nesting. The Mount Royal Park has had some nesting. anywhere where you've got big mature trees, there's a good chance that you might have these small robin-sized owl, believe it or not, the size of a robin, called the eastern screech owl. It spends the day quite often in holes in trees, cavities, or in dense cover, and they become active at dusk. And the screech owls do not screech, but they have a strange kind of a whinnying sound and some trilling types of sounds as well. But you can see they come in different colors as well. Gray ones, brown ones, kind of rusty colored ones as well. And just really quite a small little owl, but very common. You may even have them in your neighborhood if you've got very old trees around. You just may not see them. They're very well camouflaged against the barks of the trees because of their coloring. The great horned owl, found throughout North America and parts of South America. Very aggressive bird. You don't want to get too close to one of these birds if it's got a nest, because they're very protective of their nests. Rabbits, hawks, snakes. There have even been cases of these birds being in residential areas and catching small cats or small dogs. There was a warning out a couple of years ago in the West Island because there were a few great horned owls around. They were warning people if they had small dogs or cats to be careful if you had them outside, because these birds could easily pick a small animal like that off right out of a yard. They're the only creature that we know of that is immune to the smell of skunks. So they are a predator to skunks. The smell, the odor from the skunks doesn't bother the great horned owl. So normally the skunk doesn't have any enemies, except if there's a great horned owl around, and he might catch one of them. They have even been known to attack porcupines, which has unfortunately been fatal in some cases for both the bird and the porcupine. So these birds are around us. We do see them in nests quite often. So a bird to keep. We had one, the first time ever, fly over our house last year. We heard a bunch of crows very upset at something and chasing something into a tree, and all of a sudden out came the owl flying across. Now, one thing that you might see, these things on the top of the owl's head are not their ears. Everybody thinks that these tufts of fur that stick up and feathers on the tops of an owl's head are ears. Their ears are actually just on the sides of their head, about parallel to their eyes. These are just tufts of feathers that you see on the tops of owls' heads, some of the owls. So there you see one well hidden, camouflaged in a tree. And of course, that neat thing with the owls where it looks like it can almost turn their head completely around. It's about 180 degree that they can turn it. So pretty neat. The winter owl that we see every winter, these come down from the far north in the winter, is the snowy owl. They come in different colors as well. The males, the older males, are completely snow white. The younger males or the females have the black and white spotting on them. You can see how large they are. It's as large as some of the hawks we saw with their wingspan. This is a picture that was taken out at St. Hubert Airport. We get a lot of them out there in the winter. This one was taken by my wife as well, I believe, this one. This was out in Ontario, actually, on Amherst Island in the sunset. So that's what's making him look sort of orangey color. It was a great shot with the sun shining on him. So these birds have left us now for the winter, or for the summer. They've gone back up north, but next late fall into the winter, we'll see them come down again, and you'll have a chance to see them. This is an owl that lives predominantly in the boreal forests in the northern parts of Canada and Quebec, the northern hawk owl. Occasionally we see these birds come down to our area. There was one or two of them down here this year so far. Classic looking owl, that very sort of studious, some people say scary looking face on the owls. A very nice little bird though, not very large, rather hawk-like in appearance and behavior. And often it hunts in the daytime, which is different than some of the other owls. The occasional hawk owl that wanders into northeastern United States in winter may remain for weeks, attracting birders from far and wide. We actually had a birder from, I think he was from California, who came up to Montreal a number of years ago when there was a hawk owl hanging out here, because he wanted to add this bird to his list of birds seen. So he came all the way up to Canada, to Montreal, to come and see this bird. We took him out and he was able to see the bird for the first time. So he was really happy about that. So a really nice looking owl. Unfortunately, we don't see as much of them in our area as we'd like to, but if you ever get up into the northern reaches, a good chance of seeing more of them up there. This is probably one of our more common owls, the barred owl. I really like the face on these, that round face. You'll notice that these ones don't have the ears of any sort sticking up, the tufts on their head. It's a very rounded head. A lot of these birds around. My wife and I actually do an owl survey every April for Birds Canada and Environment Canada. And a couple of years ago, we had 17 to 20 something in one evening on an owl route down near the US border, down near the Franklin, Quebec area. So we find these birds around quite a bit, and a good sized bird, a little smaller than the great horned owl that we saw earlier. This barring and streaking on them is quite obvious. Pretty big wingspan. This one was taken in the winter. He was sleeping and it was snowing, so it covered him in a little coat of snow. And they breed around this time, early spring, and mostly in forested areas, wooded areas, where you're going to find these owls. This is another resident of the far north, the great gray owl. And periodically, we haven't had it happen for a little while now, but occasionally we get a movement of these birds coming south into our region. A couple of these pictures, this one up in the top left here and this one on the right, were taken a number of years back when we had the last invasion of these birds in the Montreal region. I think it was back in 2005 or 2006. We've had the occasional one come over the last few years, but no big movement of them. We probably get one of those years coming up in the next couple of years, I would think. When they have difficulty finding food up north, if it's a really severe winter, they'll often come further south to find easier food. So you see some really neat shots of them here. The great circular face and the eyes, and that little white, we call that a mustache underneath the beak. You see the beak is quite small in there. So that's our great gray. Long-eared owls, long-eared, and yet those things on the top of their head, again, are not ears. A lot of people thought they were, I guess, when they first started seeing these birds. Again, the ears are actually on the side of the head. These are just tufts of feathers, again, on the tops of their head. These birds are around. They're a little bit harder to find. Medium-sized owl, widespread, but not particularly well known in North America. We don't see them as much, but we had a couple years back where we had a big population of them move into our area. A couple of these shots, this one on the right and this one over here, were taken out in Boucherville on the South Shore here at a small park where we had 6 or 7 of them come in and spend quite a bit of time with us there. So pretty nice birds, often in evergreen trees and willow trees, sometimes really hard to see. They're very still during the day, so they kind of blend in nicely. You see the coloring, the camouflage coloring is very obvious with most of these owls. The short-eared owl, if you look at this little picture that we took out in St. Basile on the South Shore a number of years ago, back in 2005, but we did see a couple of them out at St. Hubert Airport a couple of years back. These are often out in more open areas and fields. They fly low over fields looking for their prey. As they see here, looking rather like a giant moth. They kind of float across, very nice. You can see the way the head tilts in flight, enabling them to look for their prey, at all sides as they're flying. The head can turn around. Perched though, like that, they're really quite neat to see. And they do have the little tufts that do stand up on the head. Not all the time. Mostly in flight, you don't see that, but when they're perched or sitting, you'll see the little tufts on the top of the head. So these are really neat little birds. They look like little stuffed animals when you see them sitting there. The boreal owl does come down from the north occasionally. Again, this is a boreal forest bird. They call it a mysterious owl of the dense northern woodlands. Except when calling at night in very early spring, it's easily overlooked. They're very small, very easy to hide and camouflage. And again, we do see them more in the northern reaches of Quebec, but occasionally they do come down here. We've seen them on a few different occasions. Usually the northern birds come down together. So when you see great gray owls, hawk owls, and the boreal owls, they would normally come down at the same time in the same year when it's a difficult season up north to find food for them. This is the smallest owl we have, and this is really a little tiny guy called the northern saw-whet owl. You really have to look hard to find these birds because of how small they are. But we have a bird banding station in adjacent to the Morgan Arboretum in St. Anne de Bellevue. And at night during the season, they actually put up nets and they catch these saw-whet owls and they band them. They put a band on them for identification purposes. And you can actually go out there. They actually have an open house once or twice a year when they're doing this owl banding. And by making a donation to the bird banding station, you can have one of the owls named after you. So you can basically support your own little owl. And they've had nights at the banding station where they've caught many of these birds in a single evening. But we're talking literally a bird that's only a couple inches tall. But they are a bird of prey. They do catch, they catch live food. But trying to spot them is difficult because of how small they are. You really have to be looking very, very closely to see them. You can see that one nestled in a tree up here. Great looking little owl though. Now the one owl that's really probably one of the most impressive owls. I've never seen one in the wild. They're out there in small numbers. As they say, its ghostly appearance, its shrieks, and its habit of roosting in such places as church tower belfries. The bird actually attracts much superstition. It's a really good omen for farmers who find it in their barns. For its prey, it preys chiefly on mice and rats, so it can really help out on a farm where you might have a lot of those. Discovered in its daytime retreat, the barn owl bobs its head and weaves back and forth, so kind of like that, bobbing back and forth. At night, it's often heard calling as it flies over farmlands or marshes. We don't have very many of these in Quebec. They don't often get reported if they're seen, because it causes quite a stir in the birding community. It would just get crazy, and probably get so many people out there that it would be a problem for the bird, to disturbing the bird. So there have been some random reports of these in Quebec over the years, but not very many. If you went further down into the US, though, you might find some of them around. It's certainly not one of our very common owls, but I wanted to put it in here to show you it, because it is, if you did get a chance to see one, it would be something really special. It's on our hit list of birds that we would like to add to our list of birds seen. It's not on our list right now. We keep our fingers crossed that maybe one day we will see one of these. So that is the barn owl. So there you have it. A large selection of raptors, ospreys, hawks, eagles, owls, falcons. We're going to record this session so you can go and see it later on YouTube if you want to go in and take a look more closely at these birds. We invite you also to come and find out more about Bird Protection Quebec. Our webpage is up on the screen, birdprotectionquebec.org. You can email us if you have any questions, birdprotectionquebec@gmail.com. And we have a really great Facebook page. It has a lot of great photos of birds that people take and submit to the page. You can ask questions there. You can look at all the information that gets posted up there. You can post your own information as well. We also have a weekly event going on right now, and the details are on our Facebook page and on our web page. Normally at this time of the year, it's migration, and we'd be out going on a different field trip every Saturday to a different location. With the COVID-19 situation, we're unable to do that right now. So 6 weeks ago, what we started doing was asking our people and anybody else who wanted to do it to bird from their home. Watch for birds at your home, whether you live in an apartment, a condo, your own home. Do it from your balcony, from your backyard, from your driveway, but not to leave your own property, to stay at home. And every Saturday morning, watch the number of birds that you can see, make a list of them, and submit them to us. Now, we've been doing this for 6 weeks, and this will give you an indication of how many bird species are around Montreal. In 6 weeks, we've had 67 different people have participated in this activity every Saturday morning from 51 different locations around the Montreal and southern Quebec region. Until last Saturday, all 6 weeks combined, we have seen a total of 96 different species of birds. And the big migration of birds coming through our area has not even happened yet. So there's a lot more to come. We're hoping that maybe on this Saturday, we might reach the 100 mark. We've actually had people guessing at what might be the 100th species that we get to see on what we're calling our virtual birding trips. So if you like watching birds and you want to try this out, we welcome you to participate. You can go to our webpage or go to our Facebook page, and the details of each Saturday event are there, how to participate. If you're new to this, that's fine. You can try it out. If you need help in identifying a bird, we recommend that you take a picture of the bird if you can, or take some notes about it. If you would like to, there's apps online that you can use to help you identify birds. There is a book available. I'm going to just drop this down here a second. Hang on a second. Let me get out of here. Let me just go close this down for a second. And you should be able to see me if I go here. Oops, not there. Where am I? Help. I think I have to go up here. Full page. No, I can't get myself back. Help, someone.
I like escape. That always helps me get out of where I am.
Let me see what happens here. No, that's not working either. I should be on here, but I'm not.
You want to be on Zoom?
Yeah, but I'm not coming.
Click the camera, it should help.
Yeah, that's what I was doing, and I can't get myself back. Why? Interesting. Well, can you see me up there? I'm holding up a book. I'm holding up a Sibley Field Guide, which is a book of all the different birds that we have. And yeah, why can't I get back to myself here? It's very odd.
Here comes your technician.
Yeah,
Unclick your shared screen.
Unclick. Oh, yeah. Stop share. There I am. Okay, here we are. I needed my assistant here to help me out. Okay, there's the book I was holding up for you. It's called The Sibley Birds East. It's all the birds of Eastern North America. So if you have that, that really helps you. The other thing, if you go to our website that I mentioned earlier, we have this really neat list that you can download. It's a list of all the birds in Quebec, and it's a bilingual list. So you can learn all the names of all the birds in English and French, and you can see how big it is. You can print this out from our webpage. And what we recommend is using this as a scorecard. You can check off the different birds that you've seen and keep a list of all the different ones that you've seen. So that's available on our webpage as well. So you can download that. So I'm going to go back to share screen again here, I think. Let me do share. And I'm going to bring up my presentation again in case anybody had any questions. So that's the presentation. We're open to, we've got a bit of time here. We can take some questions if anybody has questions.
I can just read you what's in the comments. So
Yep.
just Debbie said that just when you were doing your presentation, she said she had a Cooper's hawk that took a woodpecker right off the soot feeder.
Wow. Okay. That's
Yeah.
a pretty talented bird to do that.
Quite impressive.
So there's just some thank yous. Someone said, thank you so much. My 3 kids and I love Raptors and enjoy the presentation. Thanks, Sheldon and CBC. Appreciate being able to see this again on YouTube.
Yeah. Lots of people are doing that. And as I mentioned, we have some other webinars. If you missed the earlier ones, we did, the first one was an introduction to bird watching. The second one was attracting birds to your home. The third one was on spring migration birds. So lots of really great pictures and sounds of birds that are going to be coming through our area over the next couple weeks.
Right, and those are all on YouTube, so you can
Yep.
watch those again if you missed the last webinars. I'll include those in the email. I have a question if no one else is going to go forward. Just if we go and look at, let's say, this bird here. This is a good example. So, when I look at the exterior of it, the feathers, it's, I can understand how it could camouflage in the forest or wherever it hides. But what I'm curious about is what's underneath its wings when it's flying. When you look at that photo and there's kind of a checkerboard, what do you think about that? I mean, I can understand that needing to camouflage. What's the idea? What do you think the idea is behind what's under their wings?
It's basically the same feathers. So some birds have different coloring under the wings, some don't. It's unique to each different species of bird. It helps us a lot to identify them, for one thing, but I'm not really sure what the reasoning behind it is, because there is so much variance in different species of birds. In the case of the merlins, it's pretty much uniform. In flight, the back of the bird looks very similar to the underside of the bird. That's not really common in a lot of species. It is in some. I mentioned before about the, let me see if I can go back to this hawk a second. Yeah, the rough-legged hawk. You can see the dark coloring on the top, but under the wings, it's mostly white, but he's got a couple identifying marks there, as well as the black band on the belly shows up underneath. Sometimes the wings are almost transparent when they're spread out. When the feathers come together tight on their body, obviously, it looks solid. When they're spread out, you can see the light coming through on the wings. Thanks everybody for being here. It's great to see so many people coming out and having such a great interest in birds. I think everybody likes birds, some people more than others. Obviously, real bird watching fans are out there regularly, trying to see how many birds we can see. When we're doing regular field trips, I should mention that our regular field trips, as I said, are not happening right now, but hopefully one day when we're back to normal and we're out doing our bird trips, everybody's welcome to come on our trips. You don't have to be a member of Bird Protection Quebec to participate. We appreciate people who do join us. Our membership fees are used, the money that's collected is to work on our conservation projects. I didn't mention that, but we actually have properties that we protect throughout the province of Quebec that we've either, some land we've had donated to us by members, some of it we've actually purchased, and some we work together with other organizations to protect. So our membership dues help us to do that type of work. But the bird watching trips are open for everyone to come. And when we go out on like for example, if we were able to go out in the peak of migration right now to some of the real hot spots for birding, we could spend a Saturday morning, and at the end of the morning, we'd have seen 70 to 80 different species of birds in a morning. There's just that many different birds out there if you go to the right places at the right time. Most of your best birds are going to be seen early in the day too. I didn't mention that earlier. So if you're looking for birds, that's why we're doing our virtual birding trips in the Saturday mornings, because that's when the birds are most active, is early in the morning.
Yeah, so if you go over to the Facebook page for Bird Protection Quebec, there is a lot of great photos people are posting of what they're seeing, and it's really nice to see what's out there. It cheers me up.
Yeah, we make
all
a
the birds.
photo album every week. Once all the people have submitted their sightings for Saturday, a lot of the people send pictures with their lists, and we accumulate all of those pictures and put them into a photo album and a posting both on the Facebook page. We also have an IO group, which is called Bird Protection Quebec, and we have pictures up there as well. So lots of different places you can go, all bringing you into Bird Protection Quebec. And we have about close to 400 members throughout Quebec. So there's people spread all over the place, and lots of people out there submitting what they see to us. So if you like looking at pictures of birds, a good place to go is the Facebook page in particular. All right, thanks everybody.